Hey, it's Spence from WP Launch Club. Happy Saturday. I am in the lab experimenting with something that caught my attention yesterday. The topic was coding is dead. And it really was an interesting one. I posted up in the socials about it because as somebody who is primarily an entrepreneur and a marketer, I was actually talking about the same subject for really since OpenAI ChatGPT 3 came out. Now they've got ChatGPT 4. And the concept is that for many years, from the 90s until recently, the tech industry has made it that people who write code, people who are engineers, are the top echelon of entrepreneurs or money makers or successful and happy. And while that was true for a long time, they kind of wore the crown. The point of this author, and I believe similarly, is that in the world of AI, things have shifted. Now, somebody who is popular with humans, who is curating content or making things easier for a one-on-one human relationship, are really going to have an advantage over somebody who's just able to make technology. Why? Well, number one, the technology that all of us have available is now infinitely available. I'm going to show you right now what I mean about that. The thing that matters is taking the technology or taking the topic or taking the information and spoon feeding it to an audience of human beings with whom you have a relationship, with whom you resonate, with whom you've got their interest in you being an authority figure. And a lot of times it's a simple task of curating, right? So if you have a marketplace like a Facebook or somewhere where you can sell your videos by way of advertisement, people viewing them, that can create a lot of revenue for you if that's what you want to do. If you want to be in a relationship like I do with my clients, where I help them with their WordPress solutions or I help them with their marketing or something, I can do that much easier in a place where it's not so much about the technology, it's about the thing that I'm doing for them, what's actually solving their pain. Okay, here's the example I mean. I was really curious because there's lots of plugins now in the WordPress space that have a connection with OpenAI. I was curious, could I just make my own OpenAI plugin by asking OpenAI for the help? And there's three takeaways from this that I learned. As somebody who, of all of the hats that I wear, probably being a developer is the last one, but I've done really well with the LaunchFlows plugin and all the other custom coding that I've done over the years, just by the same curiosity and hacking away at it that I'm showing you here. So the three things I learned were, number one, it's not necessary for you to code by hand anymore, things that you used to, but you absolutely need to understand the basic principles of WordPress plugin development, WordPress theme, things like the hierarchy. You need to understand the metaphors of the code that's being written for you. So think of it like, I don't know, Santa and the elves. You need to know why the elves are being directed to make the toys for the kids, but you don't have to go down on the floor as Santa anymore and grab a hammer or a saw. Number two, you need to be comfortable with debugging or with figuring out where the AI has gone wrong, because it's not really super intelligent to understand the whole thing you're building as much as it's just answering your questions and spitting out close to finished raw materials. And number three, you need to also understand the way to speak to the AI in order to get the results you need so you can package it up. So if you're not specific about the end result of what you're asking it to code, it will just spit out something that may work by itself, but won't work as part of what you're putting into the box. Kind of like Legos, right? I mean, if you're building a Star Wars Death Star, you need to ask for the pieces, but also tell it why you're needing the pieces to build the larger thing. And so I'm going to give you an example of it here. I understand PHP and HTML and CSS and JavaScript and jQuery and a little bit of React and stuff, but boy, oh boy, is it tedious to just have to write everything out. So I asked OpenAI, how can I build a WordPress plugin with something that has a direct connection to the OpenAI's API? That is to say, instead of me going to the screen of OpenAI ChatGPT, I just was able to have a plugin that talked to it directly. And it gave me the answer, which was really helpful. I needed to log into my account, grab my custom API key, and then it spit out the actual part of the interface that I needed to connect my plugin. Number two, I specifically said I wanted to have a post editor that allowed me to type in a topic and generate some content. And it gave me examples of what that script might look like, as well as it did the legwork of creating things like the meta box that you see here, the submit button. And then as I started to use it, I realized, I needed to tell the person that it's working on things. I needed to give a warning dialog box, like understanding in my head, Santa looking at the elves making the toys, what I needed them to make was really important. But me actually knowing the syntax specifically, not as important anymore. Time savings, huge, because I just kept asking it a series of questions and it would just get better and better and better and better. And I would test it. And because I can just use an instantly generated WordPress site and a plugin structure, and even, I'm using the WP File Manager plugin just to have 2 files, I was able to build a plugin called the AI Blog Post Generator that is just 2 files. And let me show you what it does, and we'll talk more about it. So there's a meta box, and I am in the post, and I just type whatever I want the topic to be. Henry Ford and his contributions to the automotive industry. It's important for a real plugin that's functional with customers to use the kind of examples in their code base, in their API. And so there's lots of fun choices. I went with essay outline, right? And so it gives you some parameters to set up, including how the prompt should look and maybe some of the adjustments to temperature and how many tokens to use and so forth. Now, you don't have to get geeky on it. The point is, I was able with 2 files in about 10 minutes to make a fully functional thing that now for me, I can imagine, I'm not going to compete with other plugins like Bertha AI or Rank Math or any of the plugins that use this, but for launch flows, or maybe for some of my other products for customers, I now have a working model that I can use in a meta box in any different ways that allows somebody to input a query or a question or data. Maybe it's going to be how to make an awesome headline in a sales funnel for an upsell. That could be a use for launch flows. Watch what happens. Here's the dialog box. Again, all this is really, to me, amazingly awesome because it would have taken, like my experience as a coder or developer or doing a lot of back and forth to, the API handbook of WordPress or the code development standards of WordPress to figure out how to do this. Spits out the content. Now, this isn't perfect. I mean, I'm sure there's a million things that could be improved, but it's just awesome from the standpoint of, like, it just spit it out and then I can start editing it. So it's a proof of concept. If I were to change this and say something like, how is ice cream made at home? I don't know if this is going to result in anything. But I think it will go out and get within the parameters that I built into this model plugin enough that it proves, if I continue to refine it, use the examples of OpenAI, I'm essentially not remaking the plugin or the mechanics. I'm just building the business purpose for what I want. Now, this is interesting because, look, it gives me step-by-step ingredients. Obviously, I could work on getting the formatting so it spits these out on single lines. It gives YouTube links. And, I mean, this is really pretty awesome. There's a lot of things that you would need to improve to get it to final version. But just the fact that now it's doing it, and it's in a plugin that has 2 files and I wrote in 10 minutes. I personally would take this and I would store it in my GitHub and I would continue to refine it and play with it. And now I'd have a full featured add-on. Now, I've started to do things like this, by the way, at wplaunchclub.com in the shop, you'll see a couple things that I've started to do, not specific to this example, but in general. These little, I'm going to call them one-trick ponies, these things that do one thing only for very inexpensive. Instead of a full-blown plugin or even part of launch flows, I've just started to make these are pain points that many customers say, oh, I wish it could do this, I wish it could do that. And I actually use these myself. So for example, couldn't I just have a simple plugin that adds a discounted coupon from WooCommerce whenever a specific product is in the cart? Why, yes, you can. It's $19 and it includes the ready-to-go plugin plus the snippet code, so you can do whatever you want to do with this. And these little solutions to me are really interesting because whether you sell them or you give them away or you build them into a larger thing, this is how the new future is going to look. Spence has a customer base. I listen to them and they tell me what's wrong, what they would like to do. They send me emails. I have other products and services that lead to more questions. Do I build this into the products that I have, or do I make a standalone product? Well, let's ask the customers. Hey, customer, is this a problem you want built into my other plugins so now the plugin gets more complex and more features? Or do you just want a tchotchke, a one-trick pony? I'd rather pay 20 bucks and get the one-trick pony. And also, could you give me the code in there in case I want to modify it myself? Why, sure I can, including the instructions. So things like this are where I think things are going to go in the future, where anybody could make one-trick ponies and then use them to sell to their customers or help their customers or build an audience around this. And I'm seeing this all the time in Twitter. There's a few people, this guy Danny Postema and a few others, who are doing all these open AI solutions like that visually create a picture from somebody's face or change the logo or whatever the case may be, generating a list of SEO topics. There's so many things that can now be democratized and solved by regular people who aren't necessarily coders that you're going to do yourself a disservice if you don't at least conceive of doing this in the future. And how is that different than real development, real coding? Well, I'm not kidding myself. This is a tool, a toy, like in the old days, we went from writing on paper to typewriters to word processors. This is just an evolutionary tool, but it puts into a different realm things that used to be exclusive to, the priests in the temple, so to speak, who were really hardcore developers. Now a normal person, a normal entrepreneur with an audience, especially if you're willing to talk about it and do like I'm doing here, are able to find a real, I want to call it a livelihood, if not a hobby, a side hustle, on solving problems with technological tools. But now your workshop is filled with the OpenAI elves. Okay, this has been fun. I'm going to probably go back to work now and do the other stuff I do. But the fact that I was able to do this really excites me. And I'm not going to sell this to anybody, but I may put the code in here minus my unique API key, of course, because you got to go get your own API key for I think it's for free, but if you want to use GPT-4, you pay 20 bucks a month, which I think so far has been a real nice value. I'm going to put this in the Launch Club, probably with the code without my API key, and you guys can play with it and see what you think. But I think this is the beginning of a very, very interesting world and conversation. And certainly for the Launch Club, whether it be for these types of tchotchkes or whether it be for the other things that I've started to put back in here, the Parents Club solution, the workshops, I just feel like we're right back to 2006, except now we've got all the toys and tools for WordPress for people to do things that used to be hard. Now they're easier. So the focus is, what do we do about it? How do we sell it? What do we make of this? Instead of how can we create the functional underlying tool set? We've got the tools. What are we going to sell with it? We got the tools. Who wants to buy it? We got the tools. What pain points can we solve? All right. More coffee. Have a great Saturday. See you soon.